With such universal participation, it is not surprising that none of them were eligible for the test. But Megan's social circle was not limited to school. The girl was active on social networks, and the internet can be a very dangerous place. Detectives suggested that she could have met her killer online, and he came to meet her. She may have been communicating with someone posing as a peer. However, detectives found nothing unusual. They checked all social media accounts where her name was mentioned, but found nothing that could point to the killer. It was another dead end in the investigation. For the next month, investigators worked tirelessly. They were completely in the dark about the killer's identity, his nationality, and place of birth. But it turns out there is a way to narrow down the suspects. One of the tools the detectives had at their disposal was a biogeographic testing lab. This testing can determine a person's race from DNA. Therefore, detectives sent DNA samples found at the crime scene to a specialized lab for genetic analysis. The results of the examination showed that the search for the killer should focus on African Americans. Of course, this testing does not provide a 100% guarantee, but this information may be useful in further investigation. 6 months passed, and there was no progress. Megan's family was still coming to terms with the tragic death of their daughter. Her 17th birthday was approaching, and it was very difficult for me. After all, it was the first birthday without her, and we still didn't know who did it. A mother's heart can't get over such a loss. Investigator McDaniel couldn't stop thinking about it either. What bothered him most was that he had told Megan she was safe. But from whom exactly? At this point, it was anyone's guess. But luckily for investigators, one helpful citizen decided to share his suspicions with the police. He gave the detectives a list of names. A list of guys Megan had occasionally flirted with. All but one of them had already been questioned. Could this single name be the one who killed Megan Ladowski? It's Robert Barnes. Up until now, detectives have focused only on the high school where Megan attended. However, the girl also attended an art school where she met 16-year-old violinist Robert Barnes. He was a talented violinist and a good student. He never had any problems at school. Investigator McDaniel went to the art school to talk to the young man. He asked him what he knew about Megan, and Robert described her as a sweet, kind girl. At this point, it was of little value to the investigators. At the end of the conversation, the investigator asked Robert the same question he asked everyone else. Would he like to give a DNA sample? The young man thought for a moment and replied that he did not want to undergo the test. He politely explained why he did not want to participate in the procedure. Robert said that his mother would be against it. However, it is not necessary to obtain parental consent to take a sample from a teenager. At that time, Robert was already 17 years old and could decide for himself whether to give his DNA sample or not. The police could not ignore the fact that Robert Barnes was an African American who refused to give a DNA sample, no matter what his explanation. Investigator McDaniel, however, did not dwell on this. He gave Robert his business card and asked him to call him if his mother agreed to his DNA test. The high school student's name immediately appeared on the list of suspects. However, he soon surprised the detectives. The next day, he called Investigator McDaniel and asked to meet. The man agreed and came to the art school. When they met, Robert immediately offered his chewing gum as a DNA sample. He took the gum out of his mouth and placed it in a latex glove so that the investigator could save it and take it to the lab. Even though Robert had changed his mind, the detectives still believed he was hiding something. But was it murder? Investigator McDaniel still suspected Robert, and his guess might be correct. All that was left was to wait for the DNA test results. After a while, the lab called him and asked how he had obtained the sample. McDaniel explained that Robert had chewed the gum and put it in the wrapper. Then the experts asked if he was sure he had been watching the suspect all this time, because the woman's DNA was found on the gum. Had the teenager simply fooled the detectives? But for what purpose? The police could not understand what was happening. They were puzzled. Perhaps the guy was just kidding them, or perhaps they had missed something important. Working with teenagers is always difficult. Portsmouth detectives had encountered some unexpected situations with this age group in the past 6 months, so they suspected that the DNA swap with 17-year-old Robert Barnes might have been a prank and unrelated to the murder of Megan Ladowski. But Portsmouth police were not amused. They decided to question the young man and called him to the station. McDaniel immediately stated that the DNA sample he provided belonged to the girl, not him. At that point, detectives were not sure that he was the Mekon killer. But soon the situation changed. Robert Barnes made a statement. He said that the murder took place on Thursday. None of the detectives interviewed knew the exact day of the week. Investigator McDaniel said he felt a shiver run through his body at that moment, because he knew the man who killed Mekon Ladowski was looking at him, and it was a teenager. The story this young man told seemed incredible, even absurd. According to Robert, Mekon invited him to visit him. But when he walked into the house, he saw that the girl wasn't alone. He claims that there was a masked man in the house, who Mekon was holding at gunpoint. But when I first saw her, I was like, okay, But when I saw the dude, I was like, shit. According to Barnes, this masked man pointed a gun at him. He told me to tie her up. She was just saying, don't do it, don't do it. He said he was forced to have sex with her at gunpoint. Then, he said he had to tape her up, tie her up, and abuse her a little. Barnes told investigators he had no choice or the gunman would have killed him. After that, according to the guy, they went downstairs. When they got to the kitchen, the criminal went to the countertop, grabbed a knife, and started stabbing Mekon. Then he grabbed Robert's hand and cut his finger. So a sample of his DNA was left in the house. It was quite an unusual story. Of course, there was no masked man there. Robert Barnes was simply shifting responsibility for his actions onto this imaginary second person. He was trying to portray himself as the victim, and all the while, he was trying to explain away any evidence that might link him to the crime. However, the police were confident that the evidence clearly showed that there was only one person in the house. Besides, Robert knew too many details. He knew what had happened. He was a very angry and violent young man. And Megan Ladowski did not notice this dark side of Robert Barnes until it was too late. Eventually, 17-year-old Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Ladowski. When the girl's parents learned of the arrest, they were shocked. Angela and Chris Shorten could not imagine that the quiet young man who rode with their daughter on the bus was capable of such cruelty. The community was shocked that this was a child. Everyone expected it to be an adult, but the crime was committed by a 17-year-old boy. According to investigators, the following happened on that terrible April day. Robert Barnes entered the house through a window, went up to Megan's bedroom, and thereby seriously frightened her. He then tied her up and raped her. The girl resisted and at some point managed to break free and run down the steps. Barnes followed her. He grabbed her, took the knife, and started stabbing her. When she fell, he stabbed her several more. After that, he left the house and went on with his life. After his arrest, Robert Barnes changed his confession. In September 2009, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and aggravated rape. The court sentenced him to 42 years in prison. However, one important question remains that is causing concern. Robert Barnes has never explained why he killed Megan Ladowski, but detectives have their own version of what happened. They believe that Robert had feelings for Megan, but she rejected him and it made him angry. He couldn't stop. This event revealed the dark side of Robert Barnes, and perhaps this is his true nature. Friends, what do you think about this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Telegram channel. I will leave all the links in the description under this video. No goodbyes.